Casino workers of Reddit. What is the saddest thing you've seen? Story 1. There were these two middle-aged ladies, Greek or possibly Cypriot, who were permanent fixtures at the slot machines. Every morning when I clocked in, they were there, eyes locked on the reels, and when I left after my 10-hour shift, they were still spinning, still in the same clothes. Sometimes they didn't even leave between shifts. They were always sweet, polite, even maternal in a way. One day, luck finally kissed them back. They hit a jackpot, either £15,000 or £45,000. I can't quite remember, it was several years ago. The floor staff was thrilled. We clapped, we cheered, we hugged them. But the managers? They were practically drooling. Soon after, the women were rewarded, with free meals and an open bar tab. But we all knew what was happening. The casino seduced them back in with luxury. Within weeks, maybe less, every last penny was gone, siphoned back into the machines with a smile and a cocktail in hand. They never stood a chance. Story 2. I used to work valet at a casino. One afternoon, I brought down a regular's truck. He was friendly, casual, handed me a $5 and told me to have a good day. As I was walking away, I heard a loud clap. Thought someone had dropped something heavy. But when I brought down the next car, his truck was still there. Something fell off. I pulled up next to it and saw him, slumped in the seat, blood splattered across the window. He had ended his life right there. It got worse. His daughter, probably early 20s, came out looking for him. When she saw the scene, she collapsed, screaming, "No, Dad, no," over and over. Her boyfriend, maybe her brother, tried to hold her up, but she just crumbled. The casino gave us free counseling afterward. I went twice. I still hear her screams sometimes when I try to sleep. Story 3. Former valet again. You wouldn't believe the state of some of the cars people handed over. We're talking hoarder-level trash, bugs crawling through fast food wrappers, even rats. Some of these folks valet their cars and walk inside like they're royalty, then spend everything they have. The worst? A woman well into her 90s in a beat-up 1991 Corolla. When we parked her car, we realized the power steering was bone dry. The wheel barely turned. How she managed to drive it in with her frail little arms was a mystery. Before she left, we bought her a bottle of power steering fluid ourselves. It wasn't about the car. It was about realizing she had to choose between fixing that and feeding the slots. Guess which one she picked? Story 4. I worked with a woman who had a brutal gambling addiction. Payday came, and within 15 minutes of clocking out, she'd be at the casino blowing through her entire check. Then came the overdrafts, the bounced checks, the frantic ATM visits. Her family didn't survive it. Her husband ended his life. Insurance money came in, and she gambled it away in less than a month. Her father passed not long after, left her an inheritance, and that was gone in under 2 months. I don't know what happened to her. She just disappeared from my life, as people like that often do. But I'll never forget the way she laughed, like someone who had nothing left to lose. Story 5. About 15 years ago, I worked at a casino for 4 years. There was this one woman, came to the city from the countryside with Christmas money for her whole family. Kids, grandkids, the whole holiday stacked in cash. But before she ever made it to the mall, she lost every cent in the casino. A few years later, I visited the place again and chatted with a pit boss I used to know. She told me one of our old regulars, a genuinely nice guy, rare in that crowd, had ended his life. Gambling finally broke him. It's the happy ones I worry about most. They smile, they joke, and then they vanish. Story 6. We had to close the casino for a day due to a burst pipe. No running water meant no open floor. As I walked outside, I saw an elderly woman in the parking lot having what I can only describe as a full emotional breakdown. She was on the pavement, thrashing like a child mid-tantrum, screaming bloody murder. It didn't sound like frustration. It sounded like grief, like someone had died. Security tried to calm her down, but she was inconsolable. They later told me she was too shaken to drive, so her family had to come pick her up. Imagine being so hooked that getting kicked out for a few hours sends you spiraling. That was the most disturbing meltdown I've ever seen, and I've seen people lose everything. Story 7. You can spot the newcomers instantly. They walk in glowing, smiling, laughing with their friends. They drink, play a little, and don't seem to care too much about winning or losing. Then they come back, and again, and again. Fast forward a few years, and those same people are hunched over slot machines, dead-eyed, barely speaking. They don't smile anymore. They don't cheer when they win. They count every comp point like it's food stamps. Gambling becomes a job, A toxic, soul-sapping job. The other thing that gets me? When a regular disappears, and days later, their spouse comes in and tells us they're gone. You get close to some of these people. It hits hard when they vanish for good. Story 8. I live near a casino, and sometimes when we're bored, my friend and I go just to play penny slots or watch the blackjack tables. We don't bet big. We high-five over $2 wins like we're champions. But around us? Silence. Even when people hit decent payouts, there's no joy, no celebration. Just stone faces and empty stares. My mom said something once that stuck with me. You never hear about people getting rich at casinos. You only hear about the ones who lost everything. And she's right. The winners never really win. They're just temporarily not losing. Story 9. I worked at a casino over a decade ago. One time, a woman hit a small jackpot, around $2,000. We needed to verify her ID for tax paperwork, and that's when we realized she had signed up for the state's self-exclusion list for problem gamblers. That meant we weren't supposed to let her in, let alone pay her winnings. But after checking the most recent exclusion list, we saw she had removed herself from the ban just in time. She got the money, and then she did what many do, fed every cent back into the machines. She made a few ATM runs, burned through it all. When her cash was gone, she walked up to the cashier and asked to be put back on the exclusion list. It was like watching someone beg to be saved from themselves. Story 10. One of the most depressing things was coming into work in the morning and seeing the same people still gambling who were there when I left the night before. Some parents even tag-teamed it. One would gamble while the other stayed with the kids, sleeping on hard benches in the bright casino lobby. The place was intentionally anti-kid. No vending machines, no cartoons, no distractions. Lights so harsh you couldn't relax. But still, every weekend, we saw exhausted children curled up on metal chairs while their parents fed money into flashing machines. Technically, the kids were supervised, but emotionally, they were invisible. It was like watching childhood bleed away in real time. Story 11. I used to work in the cage at a casino, handling money and check cashing. You see a lot over time. One of the most heartbreaking moments was when a woman came up to the window holding a check. It was made out to the electric company. She asked, totally straight-faced, if she could just scratch out "electric company" and write in the name of the casino instead. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, or maybe hadn't slept. I told her we couldn't do that. She looked at me like I had just taken away her last hope. I've seen kids asleep in chairs outside the floor on Christmas Eve. While their parents were inside chasing jackpots, they curled up under the fake glitter of Christmas trees. There's a hollowness in that kind of scene, a mix of desperation, denial, and addiction. It seeps into the air. That woman never came back to my window. I still wonder if she ever got her power turned back on, or if she kept chasing reels until everything went dark. Story 12. Christmas at the casino was always a mix of forced cheer and silent sadness. The company put up several Christmas trees around the floor, trying to create a festive atmosphere. But then you'd see it, small children curled up near the trees, asleep in chairs or on the carpet, waiting for parents who were too deep in the game to care. The sight of a 5-year-old lying beside a blinking slot machine, surrounded by tinsel and fake snow, just doesn't sit right. Parents would justify it. We're just here for a little while. Or they'll be fine, they're sleeping. But they weren't fine. They were exhausted, ignored, and trapped in a place that was never meant for them. The sound of jingles and digital slot reels mixed with crying toddlers is something I'll never forget. You start to realize that for some families, the casino isn't a getaway or a treat, it's their routine. And for those kids, Christmas didn't come with presents or magic. It came with flashing lights, stale air, and the distant hope that mom or dad might finally win something. Story 13. One of the more disturbing encounters involved a man trying to cash a trust fund check. He stormed in, red-faced, demanding we exchange it for chips. "This is my nephew's money. I'm legally in charge of it," he barked. The check was from a trust account, clearly not meant for casinos. When we refused, he exploded, slammed his hand on the counter. Security had to step in and walk him out. Another time, a guy brought in his federal tax return check. He'd scratched out his own name and literally handwrote the casino's name instead. He seemed desperate, like a man who had tried everything else. When the bank refused to cash it, he came back furious, blaming us. It was like watching people try to rewrite financial reality in real time. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They were just drowning, and the casino felt like the only rope left to grab. But the house doesn't hand out lifelines. It gives you more rope to hang yourself with if you're not careful. Story 14. I was working on the floor when a man collapsed with a heart attack at the poker table. Paramedics rushed in, shocking him on the casino carpet while we cleared the area. But even amidst the chaos, someone shoved past the scene, annoyed it was blocking their shortcut to a slot machine. That kind of coldness, that tunnel vision, is what gambling does to people. Another time, a man walked into the blackjack pit, slammed $1,565 on the table, and said, "Dealer, my family's about to have a great Christmas or no Christmas." We all watched, silent, as he lost every dollar in under 20 minutes. Not a single hand went his way. He stood up, blamed the dealer, and walked off. No yelling. No fight. Just defeat. We saw him again the next day. Same clothes, same hollow stare. Our casino had mostly repeat customers. So yeah, it probably was his family's Christmas money. And that's the thing. No one comes in expecting to lose it all. But they do. Over and over. And still they come back. Story 15. 10 years of dealing table games taught me more about addiction than any textbook ever could. I've watched grown men cry at the table. Not from losing big, just from realizing they'd done it again. There was a woman who brought her disabled child in a wheelchair. She'd park him beside her and play for 20 hours straight. The kid would sleep, wake up, and sleep again. No food, no attention, just blinking lights and endless spins. I once dealt to a man with obvious dementia. He couldn't remember his hand, forgot what the game was, and kept tipping generously. He was overserved alcohol, and we filed a report. But nothing changed. He came back week after week. The worst part? He was a good tipper. And in that world, if you're tipping, people look the other way. Casinos don't deal in compassion. They deal in odds. Humanity is often the first casualty. Story 16. It happened just a few tables away from me. A man and his girlfriend were arguing. Nothing out of the ordinary at first. Then suddenly he snapped. He lunged at her and tried to choke her right in the middle of the casino. Dealers screamed. Chips scattered. Security came charging in. She was gasping, clawing at his arms. It took 2 guards to pull him off. He fled, sprinting off the casino floor into the wooded area behind the property. They found him later. He had ended his life just a few yards from the building. It shook everyone, staff, patrons, even the hardened regulars. The scariest part wasn't just the violence. It was how fast it happened. One moment, he was just another gambler losing a few hands. The next, he was gone. Gambling didn't make him violent, maybe, but it certainly brought out whatever darkness he was already carrying. We didn't see her again after that night. I hope she found peace. But that kind of trauma doesn't just leave. It lingers. Story 17. The first time I ever went to a casino, I sat down at a roulette table next to a guy who reeked. It was a smell I couldn't place at first, something rotten, chemical, almost sour. I thought maybe it was spilled liquor or bad cologne. Then my dad leaned over and said, "They wear diapers, you know, so they don't have to get up." I didn't believe him. Thought he was joking. Then I saw it mentioned online, over and over, gamblers who sit at the machines for so long that they relieve themselves right there. Some don't even try to hide it. It's not about the win anymore. It's about not missing the next spin. That night, I cashed out early. I couldn't stop thinking about how far someone has to fall to choose a jackpot over their own hygiene, their dignity. People think addiction looks like needles or bottles. But sometimes it's an old man in a diaper at a penny slot machine, hoping this is the one that finally pays out. Story 18. I wasn't there when it happened, but I knew the place and the people. Motor City Casino, Detroit, late 1999. I was part of the IT vendor team that helped open the floor. The launch had been delayed multiple times, costing millions. A month after opening, an off-duty police officer lost everything in one night. Instead of going home, he sat at the bar for a while. Quiet. No outburst. Then he walked back onto the floor, looked around one last time, and took his own life right there. My contact at the casino was working that shift. She never really talked about it in detail, but the way her voice changed when she mentioned it, that was enough. They cleaned it up, shut down for a few hours, and reopened like nothing happened. The floor must go on. The lights never stopped blinking. It's easy to forget that real lives are unraveling in places like that, under neon signs and jackpot jingles. But I never forgot. That story stayed with me more than any tech launch or rollout ever could. Story 19. I worked several positions over 6 years in casinos, everything from valet to pit supervisor. But the hardest thing I ever witnessed was painfully personal. One of my high school friends' dads started showing up more and more. Back in the day, the guy was a success story. He was healthy, owned a small business, even had his own plane. He was the kind of dad you hoped your parents would be friends with, sharp, funny, dependable. But over time, we watched him rot from the inside out. He gained weight, his face looked permanently flushed, and he started living at the bar. He'd sit at the same machine for days. Sometimes we'd find him asleep in his chair. His wife eventually left. His son, my friend, cut all ties. And still he came back. Years later, my family went to that same casino. He was still there. Same machine. Same blank stare. He didn't recognize us. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. Gambling didn't just take his money. It took his family, his health, and whatever made him human. Story 20. I was tending bar on the casino floor when an older man sat down. He had that quiet, lonely energy you recognize right away in this business. He ordered a whiskey neat, then another. After a while, he started talking. Said his wife of 50 years had passed from cancer just weeks earlier. They had no kids, and now he had no one. I took all our savings, he said calmly. Came here to have some fun until it runs out. Then I'll go home to be with her. He wasn't crying, wasn't drunk, just done. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and topped off his glass. He didn't say goodbye when he left. I think about him more often than I should. Not because I'm sure he did something drastic, maybe he didn't, but because he came to the casino not to win, but to disappear. That's what some people come here for. Story 21. We had a roulette and blackjack room that was attached to a nightclub. One night, a man spent more money in 2 hours than I made in 2 months. He wasn't drunk. I tried to talk to him, to get him to slow down, but he just said he was lonely. Playing blackjack was the only thing that made him feel okay. He was far from home, maybe Russian. He carried this sadness that never left his face. From the moment he sat down to the moment he left, he never smiled once. Just kept playing, betting thousands at a time, like he was trying to fill some hole that couldn't be touched. It was hard to watch. We see so much of that, but he stuck with me. Story 22. I was playing poker at a tribal card room when a guy in his early 20s sat down. He clearly had no experience. He rebought chips 3 times, and during small talk, mentioned he had just been laid off from the local factory. He said he was using part of his severance check to try his luck. After busting out again, he left quietly. The whole table went silent. Nobody made a joke. Nobody smiled. The fun just vanished from the game in that moment. Story 23. Tuesday mornings were always the saddest. That's when the people on Social Security would show up, right after the weekly 4-hour cleaning. They'd play penny slots with the last $10 they had left. I worked at a bank near an Indian casino, and every check day, a bus would pick up retirees from a home nearby and take them to the casino. The next day, many of them came to us at the bank trying to dispute transactions, claiming fraud. It happened every month. They lost their money and then tried to convince themselves someone else had taken it. That was the only way they could live with it. Story 24. My dad had a gambling problem, and I saw some heartbreaking things. Once, a blind Chinese man came into the casino with bodyguards, just so they could help him gamble. I saw couples lose everything and then sit silently together, not even speaking, their eyes glazed over. I watched a woman lose it all and just sit there afterward, unmoving, like her body had turned to stone. Once, when I was young, my dad hit it big and made me sit at the machine next to him. My machine started winning, but his didn't, so he shoved me out of my seat and took over. I don't miss casinos. They're soaked in desperation. Story 25. I worked valet at a casino. One night, someone dropped off their car, and I jumped in to park it. The smell was horrendous. My supervisor came over and called the police. When they popped the trunk, it was full of rotting groceries, including raw chicken, 4 months old, baking in Missouri's summer heat. The owner said their helper had quit, and they'd just been eating out every night at the casino since. They didn't have the money for it, but still came back daily. After that, I stopped gambling completely. Working valet showed me how fast people fall apart, and how far they'll go to pretend they haven't. Story 26. I used to work graveyard shift as a slot tech. One night, a woman in her late 50s came in wearing a sequined red dress. She was loud, flirty, and clearly drunk. By 3 a.m., she had blown through everything. She begged for a comp drink. Security refused. She screamed, cried, then laughed manically and stormed off. Half an hour later, I was called to fix a jammed machine in a corner near the bathrooms. The smell hit me first. She was slumped in the chair, completely naked from the waist down, her dress stuffed under her. She had urinated and defecated herself while still playing. Her hands were still on the buttons. She looked up at me and whispered, "I'm not done yet." Security escorted her out, but the machine wasn't touched for days, even after being cleaned. People swore it always smelled faintly like her afterward. I still avoid that corner of the floor. Story 27. I was working valet when I noticed a diaper bag someone had left on the front seat. The car was running. I waited a few minutes. No one returned. I finally looked inside, thinking maybe there was a phone. Instead, I found an infant. A baby maybe 4 months old, wrapped in a blanket, sweating and crying. Security rushed in, and eventually, the parents were found inside, playing blackjack. They had been there for over an hour. When confronted, the mother yelled, "It's not like we left her in the casino." CPS got involved, but I don't know what happened after that. What haunts me the most? The baby had a winning scratch ticket tucked in the blanket. They had used her as a good luck charm. She was their lucky chip. I quit valet a month later. I couldn't unsee it. Story 28. I dealt poker at a smaller casino where regulars were practically furniture. There was one man, mid-40s, who never spoke, just grunted and played. He'd buy in for $1,000 every night and lose it slowly, like he needed every hand to hurt. One night, he started winning. Big. He smiled. First time ever. Then he leaned in and said, "Now I can afford to do it." I didn't know what he meant. He left with $7,000 in chips, cashed out, and vanished. The next day, we heard someone had jumped from the 7th story of the parking structure. It was him. He left a note in the hotel room. I didn't want to die broke. That smile still haunts me. It wasn't joy. It was relief. Story 29. I worked in security and got called to a hotel room for a welfare check. A VIP guest hadn't checked out. When we entered, every mirror was covered in towels. The windows were duct taped. There were empty chip trays all over the floor. The man was sitting on the bed, fully clothed, staring at a turned-off TV. He didn't blink, didn't move. We called paramedics. When they took him away, his hands were covered in blood, but it wasn't his. He had been cutting open his stuffed animals and sewing coins inside. He believed the machines were spying on him. Thought he had to protect his winnings from the eyes. He'd lost over $60,000 in 48 hours. The room was never rented again. We started calling it the mirror room. No one ever wanted to go in. Story 30. I worked at the cashier cage. One of our regulars was a woman in her 60s. Always wore pearls, always smelled like rose water. She was elegant, even when losing. One night, she came in, dressed more formally than usual. Hair done, makeup perfect. She played for a few hours, cashed out just $10, and walked to the cage. She handed me her player's card and said, "Close my account, sweetheart. I'm going home." I smiled and asked if everything was okay. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and said, "It's been lovely." Next morning, the news said an elderly woman had jumped from the bridge downtown. She'd left a note in her purse. "I lost everything, but thank you for always treating me like a person." I never forgot her. Story 31. I used to clean hotel rooms attached to the casino. Most were forgettable, bottles, wrappers, maybe a busted TV. But room 812? That one's burned in my mind. When I walked in, everything was spotless, except the chair. It was an old recliner dragged from who knows where and placed in front of the window, facing out over the strip. There were cigarette burns all over the arms. A single ashtray overflowing. On the table next to it was a receipt, $4,000 in chips, all cashed out. Next to that, a Polaroid. A man sitting in the chair, smiling, with a gun in his lap. He wasn't in the room anymore, but the bullet hole in the ceiling said enough. No blood, no body, just silence. They never told us what happened, but they never rented the room again either. I still dream about that chair sometimes, and wonder how long he sat there, waiting for the courage to pull the trigger. Story 32. I worked in food service inside the casino, mostly buffet duty, sometimes private room setups. One night, I was asked to deliver a birthday cake to a VIP slot player's suite. When I got there, I knocked. No answer. I opened the door. The room was dim, and the air was thick. There were dozens of balloons scattered across the floor, a banner that read, "Happy 7th Birthday," and a cake with blue frosting. But the guest was a man in his 50s. Alone. He was sitting on the floor, crying, wearing a paper party hat. He looked up and asked, "Do you want to sing with me?" I froze. He whispered, "I haven't celebrated since I was a kid." I left the cake and walked out. Didn't say a word. Later, I found out he had lost his son 7 years ago, in a car accident. Same day, same age. Every year, he booked the same room, ordered the same cake, and sat there alone. No games, no gambling. Just grief. Some addictions don't come from greed. They come from ghosts. Story 33. I was a pit boss for 6 years and prided myself on being unshakable. But then came the woman in white. She showed up every Friday at 2:17 a.m. Always the same dress, flowing, pale, almost bridal. She never spoke, never smiled. She'd sit at the same slot machine, 3rd row from the back wall. She never played. Just sat there, hands on her lap. Security checked her ID real. She was a local. But when we looked into the name, we found out she died 2 years prior. Car accident. Her fiancé had been gambling when it happened. One night, I approached her. I tapped her shoulder gently. She turned to me and whispered, "He never came home." Then stood up and vanished. No sound, no movement, just gone. We pulled the tapes. The footage showed the machine turning on by itself, the seat lowering, but no one sitting there. We removed the machine the next week. But at 2:17 a.m. every Friday, you can still hear the coins drop, even though that machine is long gone. Story 34. I worked at a mid-sized casino in the cashier's cage. There was this guy, probably early 30s. He came in once every 2 weeks, always alone, always polite. He'd go from ATM to table, back to ATM, like clockwork. One night, he walked up to my window with $20. He smiled and said, "Last bet. If I win, I get dinner. If I lose, I get peace." I chuckled, not realizing what he meant. He placed it all on a single roulette spin. Lost. He nodded, thanked the dealer, and walked out. 3 hours later, police showed up. They found him in his car in the parking garage, engine off, windows up. He'd overdosed on sleeping pills. He left a note in the glove box. "I just wanted to feel like I had control over something." It wasn't about the money. It was about the decision. That was the night I stopped joking with customers.